Homeless at 16, she inherited an abandoned apple orchard, then found what changed her life forever. It's a story about how the places we think have forgotten us are sometimes the only ones that have been waiting for us all along. And if you've ever felt lost, or like you didn't have a place to call your own, I think this might be for you. So if you're here for stories about finding your way back, hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. The day I turned 18 was the day I officially became no one's problem. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a door closing behind me, the lock tumbling into place with a sound so final it echoed in my bones. For 2 years, since I was 16, I had been a ward of the state, living in a group home that smelled of industrial cleaner and quiet desperation. 2 years of counting down the days, thinking 18 was the magic number, the escape hatch. But standing in the narrow hallway with my life packed into a single, worn-out backpack and a black trash bag, the magic felt thin, like a worn-out blanket that couldn't possibly keep out the cold. Mrs. Gable, my caseworker for the final 6 months, stood before me with a clipboard and a strained, professional smile. She was a woman made of beige fabric and tired sighs. To her, I was the last file on her desk on a Friday, the final checkbox before she could go home to a life I couldn't imagine. "All right, Maya," she said, her pen tapping a rhythm of impatience on the board. "Here is your final paperwork. This packet contains your birth certificate, your social security card, and a list of resources. Shelters, job placement programs, that sort of thing." She handed me a thick manila envelope that felt both impossibly heavy and completely worthless. It was the official summary of my existence, a paper ghost. "You have your final stipend check?" I nodded, the folded check a stiff rectangle in my pocket. $400. It was meant to be a bridge to a new life, but it felt like a stone, pulling me down before I'd even learned to swim. "Good," she said, her gaze already drifting past me toward the door. "Well, the state's responsibility is now concluded. We wish you the very best in your future endeavors, Maya." Future endeavors. It sounded like something you'd say to a failed corporate merger, not a person. I looked around the hallway one last time. The scuffed linoleum floors, the pale yellow walls with their faint, greasy shine, the motivational poster of a mountain climber with the word "Persevere" in bold font. It had been my entire world for 2 years, and I felt absolutely no connection to it. It wasn't a home, it was a holding pen. And my time was up. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say goodbye. I just turned and walked out the door, the chilly October air hitting my face like a slap. Freedom. It tasted like exhaust fumes and the metallic tang of fear. I walked without a destination, the trash bag bumping against my leg, a constant, crinkling reminder of how little I had. The $400 in my pocket felt like it was already spent, evaporating with every step I took into the vast, indifferent city. I'd nurse a cup of lukewarm coffee from the lobby, trying to make it last, trying to make the feeling of warmth last. Most of the day was spent walking through city parks, through libraries, through crowded shopping centers where I could feel invisible. I was trying to outrun the feeling of being utterly untethered, a ship without an anchor, drifting in a hostile sea. The $400 was dwindling at an alarming rate, a countdown clock to absolute zero. I filled out job applications at fast food restaurants and coffee shops, my lack of address a glaring red flag. I used the motel's address, but the knowing, pitying looks from managers told me they understood. I was temporary. I was a risk. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was an unknown number with an out-of-state area code. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a spam call, but some flicker of instinct made me answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice small. "Am I speaking with Maya Lane?" a woman's voice asked. It was calm, professional, and held a note of authority that immediately put me on edge. "Who is this?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "My name is Catherine Albright. I'm an attorney. I'm calling on behalf of the estate of Eleanor Vance." The name hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. Eleanor Vance, my grandmother. A name I hadn't heard spoken aloud in 8 years. A name that was synonymous with warmth, the smell of baking bread, and the sharp, stinging pain of abandonment. "My grandmother?" I whispered, sinking onto the edge of the lumpy motel bed. "Yes. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Eleanor passed away 3 months ago." The words didn't register at first. They floated in the air, disconnected from reality. Passed away. It was a soft, gentle phrase for something that felt like a slammed door. I had spent 8 years being angry at her, imagining 1,000 different reasons why she'd left me. Why she'd put me in the care of a neighbor one day with a promise to be back in a week, and then just vanished. In all my imagined scenarios, she was alive. Angry, selfish, forgetful, maybe, but alive. The thought of her being gone was an entirely new kind of emptiness. I didn't know," I managed to say. "I understand this must be a shock," Ms. Albright said, her tone softening with a hint of sympathy. "The reason I'm calling, Ms. Lane, is that your grandmother named you as the sole beneficiary of her will." I laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. Her will? What did she have to leave? She left me. That was it. "I understand your feelings, Maya," the lawyer said, and the switch to my first name felt calculated, an attempt to build a bridge. "But she did have an asset, a significant one. She owned a property, a house and some land in upstate New York. It's been in your family for generations. An apple orchard." An apple orchard. The words conjured a faint, dreamlike memory. A little girl, me, perched on a wooden ladder, my small hands struggling to twist a bright red apple from a branch. My grandmother's laughter, as warm and golden as the late afternoon sun, filtering through the leaves. The memory was so vivid, so painful, it made my chest ache. "That place was sold years ago," I said, trying to force the memory away. "She told me they had to sell it." "No," Ms. Albright said gently. "She never sold it. She fought very hard to keep it. And now, it's yours, free and clear." The room started to spin. An orchard, a house, mine. It was impossible. It had to be a mistake, or some kind of cruel joke. "Why are you telling me this now?" "We had difficulty locating you," she explained. "Your grandmother's records were intentionally obscure. She made it difficult for anyone to find you. It was only your 18th birthday, your legal emancipation, that allowed us to cross-reference public records and finally get a current contact number." Intentionally obscure. The phrase snagged in my mind. Why would she make me hard to find? "There's a package waiting for you at the bus depot in Kingston. It contains the keys, a deed, and a personal item from your grandmother," Ms. Albright continued. "The address is on the envelope. I'm sorry for your loss, Maya. And, for what it's worth, I believe your grandmother loved you very much." She gave me the details, the address of the depot, the confirmation number. I wrote it all down on the back of a takeout menu, my hand shaking. After we hung up, I sat in the silent motel room for a long time, the lawyer's words echoing in the space where my anger used to be. A house, an orchard, a place that was mine. It felt less like a gift and more like a riddle, a mystery wrapped in 8 years of silence and a lifetime of pain. For the first time in a very long time, I had a destination. I didn't know if I was walking toward a home or just a new kind of heartbreak, but it was somewhere to go. And right then, that was everything. The next morning, I checked out of the motel. The remaining $180 of my stipend money felt different now. It wasn't a countdown to disaster anymore. It was a means to an end. I spent $65 on a one-way bus ticket to Kingston, New York. The bus station was a chaotic swirl of noise and people, a river of arrivals and departures. I found my gate and settled in for the long wait, my backpack on my lap, the world outside the grimy window, a gray, indifferent blur. As the bus finally pulled out of the city, I watched the towering skyscrapers and concrete canyons give way to sprawling suburbs, then to wide, open highways flanked by the fiery colors of late autumn. The city, which had been my entire world, shrank behind me until it was nothing more than a smudge of haze on the horizon. I was heading into the unknown,
and every mile the bus traveled felt like a mile further away from the person I had been. The girl in the group home, the girl in the motel. She was a ghost I was leaving behind. The journey took 6 hours. I watched the landscape transform. The flat, crowded terrain of the coast slowly buckled and rose into rolling hills. The trees grew thicker, their leaves a riot of gold, orange, and crimson. Small towns flickered past the window, each with a white-steepled church and a main street lined with brick buildings. It was a world away from the relentless energy of the city. It was quieter, slower, older. With every passing mile, the faint, dreamlike memories of my grandmother and the orchard grew stronger, more insistent. I remembered the specific scent of the old farmhouse, a mix of cinnamon, damp earth, and wood smoke. I remembered the rough bark of the apple trees against my palms as I climbed them. I remembered the taste of a freshly picked apple, so crisp and sweet it made my teeth ache. And I remembered her face, framed by graying hair, her eyes crinkling at the corners when she smiled. The memories were so clear, so full of love, that they made the 8 years of silence even more incomprehensible. How could the person from those memories just disappear? How could she leave a 10-year-old girl with a neighbor and never come back? The anger I thought had been extinguished by the news of her death flared up again, hot and sharp. It was easier to be angry than to be hurt. Anger was a shield. Grief was a gaping wound. The man sitting next to me, a tired-looking construction worker, glanced at me as I wiped an unexpected tear from my cheek. He didn't say anything, just offered me a small, tight-lipped smile of solidarity, a silent acknowledgement of a shared human moment. By the time the bus hissed to a stop in Kingston, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. The air was different here. It was clean and crisp, with the scent of wood smoke and damp leaves. It was the smell of my childhood. Following Ms. Albright's directions, I found the package at the bus depot's luggage claim. It was a simple, sturdy cardboard box addressed to me in a familiar, elegant script. My grandmother's handwriting. Seeing it was like a punch to the gut. Inside, there was a large, sealed manila envelope, a set of old-fashioned iron keys tied together with a piece of twine,
and a small, worn, wooden bird carved with incredible detail. A robin. I remembered this. It was something my grandfather had carved for her decades ago. She used to keep it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, and she told me it was her good luck charm. Why would she leave it for me? Tucked into the twine around the keys was a small, folded note. In that same handwriting, it said, "The big one is for the front door. The small one is for the box in my closet. Be brave, my little bird. I love you." The box in her closet. The note implied she knew I would be here, that she had prepared this for me. The mystery deepened, pulling me forward. I got directions from the station attendant. The property was another 4 miles out of town, too far to walk with my bags before dark. A local taxi, a dusty sedan driven by a man who looked as old as the hills, agreed to take me. "The old Vance place?" he'd asked, his eyes studying me in the rearview mirror. "Haven't seen anyone head out there in years, not since Eleanor left." He fell silent after that, and the rest of the drive was quiet, the car rattling down country roads that grew narrower and more cracked with each turn. Finally, he slowed and pointed. "There she is." And I saw it. Through a break in the trees, I saw the orchard first. It was a wild, tangled mess. The neat rows, I remembered, were choked with weeds and overgrown grass. The trees themselves were gnarled and ancient, their branches heavy with unpicked apples, many of which had fallen to rot on the ground below. It looked sad and neglected, a place forgotten by time. Beyond the orchard, half hidden by overgrown lilac bushes, was the house. It was a simple 2-story farmhouse, once white, now a peeling, weathered gray. The porch sagged on one side, and a shutter hung crookedly from an upstairs window, like a broken wing. It looked less like a home and more like a shipwreck run aground in a sea of weeds. My heart sank. This was it? This broken-down place was my inheritance? The taxi driver must have seen the look on my face. "Needs work," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "But it's got good bones. Your grandmother, she loved this place more than anything." He helped me get my bags out, and as he drove away, the sound of his engine fading into the twilight, the silence that descended was absolute. It was the kind of deep, profound quiet I hadn't experienced in years. No traffic, no sirens, no shouting from the room next door. Just the rustle of leaves in the wind and the distant call of a crow. I stood there for a long moment, just looking. It was daunting. It was overwhelming. But it was real, and it was mine. I walked up the crumbling stone path to the front door, my backpack feeling impossibly heavy. The air grew colder as the last of the light faded from the sky. I found the lockbox mentioned in the lawyer's call, tucked away under a loose porch board, just as the note had hinted. My fingers fumbled with the cold metal, but the key turned smoothly. With a deep breath, I selected the largest iron key from the set. It was heavy and ornate, a key from another century. It slid into the lock with a grating sound. For a second it wouldn't turn, and a wave of panic washed over me. What if I couldn't get in? What if I was locked out of the one place in the world that was supposed to be mine? I jiggled it, pushed harder, and with a loud, groaning clunk, the lock gave way. I pushed the door open. It swung inward on protesting hinges, revealing a dark, cavernous space. The air that rolled out to meet me was thick and musty. The smell of dust, of decay, of time itself. It was the scent of a place
that had been holding its breath for a very, very long time. I stepped over the threshold, pulling my bags in after me, and closed the door on the encroaching night. I was in. I flicked a light switch by the door, not expecting anything, but to my astonishment, a single bare bulb overhead flickered to life, casting a weak yellow glow over the entryway. Dust motes danced in the light like tiny ghosts. To my left was a living room, the furniture shrouded in white sheets, creating an eerie landscape of pale, silent shapes. To my right, a staircase led up into the darkness. Straight ahead was a hallway leading toward the back of the house, toward the kitchen I remembered so vividly. Every surface was coated in a thick layer of dust. Cobwebs draped the corners of the ceiling like funeral bunting. But underneath the neglect, I could see the place I remembered. The wide plank floors, the sturdy dark wood of the banister. It was all still here, waiting. Remembering the note, I went upstairs. The second door on the left. That was her room. I pushed the door open, and the smell of her was faint, but there, a hint of lavender and old books. Her bed was neatly made, also covered in a sheet. Her dresser was clear, but in the corner, the doors of a large wooden wardrobe stood slightly ajar. My closet. I pulled the doors open. Inside, her clothes still hung, a line of simple dresses and worn cardigans. On the floor of the wardrobe, just as the note promised, was a wooden box. It wasn't large, but it was solid, bound with leather straps. It had a small brass lock, the second key. It slid in perfectly. I turned it, and the lock clicked open. My heart was hammering in my chest. This was it, the answer. The reason for 8 years of silence was inside this box. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside the box, the first thing I saw was a stack of photographs, tied with a faded ribbon. My hands trembled as I picked them up. The top one was of me, about 7 years old, grinning with a missing front tooth, holding up a half-eaten apple. Then one of my grandmother and me on the porch swing, her arm wrapped around my shoulders. Then one of my grandfather, a man I barely remembered, standing proud in front of a freshly painted barn that was now probably collapsing. They were snapshots of a life I had almost convinced myself I'd imagined. Beneath the photos was the wooden robin, the one from the package, nestled on a bed of yellowed newspaper clippings. And under that, a single thick envelope made of heavy cream-colored paper. My name was written on the front in her beautiful, familiar script. For Maya. This was the personal item Ms. Albright had mentioned. This was the letter. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like it contained the weight of all the years, all the questions, all the pain. I took the envelope and sat on the dusty floor, my back against the wardrobe. The single bulb from the hallway cast long shadows into the room. The house was utterly silent, as if it too was waiting to hear what she had to say. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. I unfolded the pages. There were at least a dozen, front and back, all covered in her handwriting. I took a deep, shuddering breath and began to read. "My dearest Maya, my little bird," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means 2 things. It means I am gone, and it means you have come home. I am so sorry for the first, and so very, very happy for the second. I know you have questions. I know you must hate me. You have every right to. I have imagined this moment 1,000 times, imagined the anger and the hurt in your eyes. Please, before you judge me completely, let me tell you the story you were never supposed to have to know." I had to stop and take a breath. Her voice was so clear in my head, it was as if she were sitting right there in the room with me. "Do you remember your father, Maya? I know the memories are faint. You were so young when he left. He was my son, and I loved him. But he was a man who made shadows follow him. He fell in with the wrong people, people who didn't operate in the light of day. He borrowed money he couldn't repay, not just a little, a lot, a dangerous amount from dangerous men. When he disappeared, they came looking for the debt. They came here, to the orchard. My blood ran cold. I remembered strange cars, hushed, angry conversations behind closed doors. I'd been too young to understand. They threatened me, Maya. They threatened the farm. But that wasn't the worst of it. They saw you. They saw how much I loved you. And they made it clear that if I didn't pay, the debt would be taken from you. They said they would take you, that you would be their collateral. I looked into their eyes, and I knew it wasn't an empty threat. They were cold, empty men, and you were just a thing to them, a piece of leverage. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police. These men had connections, and they would have known. They would have hurt you before anyone could have done anything. Selling the farm was my first thought, but it wouldn't have been enough, not by a long shot. And they would have just taken the money, and I'd have nothing left to protect you with. I had to get you somewhere they could never find you, somewhere they would never even think to look. The system. The word hung on the page, stark and brutal. I know what you must have thought, that I abandoned you. In a way, I did. I had to make it look real. I had to sever all ties. I gave you to Mrs. Henderson next door, told her a lie about a family emergency, and I walked away. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It felt like I was ripping my own heart out of my chest. I drove for an hour and just sat in my car on the side of the road and wept until I couldn't breathe. But I knew it was the only way to keep you safe. They watched me for weeks. If I had tried to contact you, they would have known. So I disappeared from your life, to make you a ghost to them. I moved to the city. I sold my car, took on 3 different jobs. I was a cleaner, a dishwasher, a night stalker at a grocery store. Every single penny I made that wasn't for rent on a tiny basement apartment and cheap food, I sent to them. An anonymous money order, every single month, for 8 years. I was paying off my son's ghost, paying for your safety. And with whatever was left, I paid the property taxes on the orchard. I couldn't bear to lose it. I just knew, that one day, if I could hold on long enough, it would be your safe harbor. It would be the home I couldn't give you. The years passed. I got reports indirectly. I had a friend, a person you'll never know, who kept an eye on things. I knew you were moved to a group home. I knew you were safe physically, but I knew your heart was broken. And that was a pain I carried with me every single day. I aged a lifetime in those 8 years, Maya. The work, the worry, it wore me down. About a year ago, I made the final payment. The debt was cleared. For the first time in nearly a decade, you were truly safe. I was planning to come for you. I was saving up, trying to get the house ready. I was going to explain everything. Then, I got sick. The doctors told me it was aggressive, that I didn't have much time. I was so angry, Maya. So angry at the universe for its cruel timing. After all that fighting, all that waiting, I wasn't going to get to see you again. I wasn't going to get to hold you and tell you I was sorry. That's when I called the lawyer, Ms. Albright. I set everything up to make sure the orchard, the one thing I had left to give you, would go to you without any trouble on your 18th birthday. I made it hard for her to find you, just in case. Old habits die hard. This house is a mess, I know, and the orchard is neglected. I am so sorry I couldn't leave it to you in better shape.
But it is yours. It is paid for. No one can ever take it from you. In the bottom of this box, you'll find another envelope. It's not much, but it's everything I had left. A little seed money to help you get started. What you do with this place is your choice. You can sell it. Lord knows, after everything, you deserve an easy life. Take the money and go see the world. Find some happiness for both of us. Or you can stay. You can try to bring it back to life. It's hard work, but there is good soil here, and the roots are deep. This land has a way of holding you, of healing you. It healed me after your grandfather passed. Maybe it can heal you too. Whatever you choose, know this, Maya. Not a day went by that I didn't think of you. Not a single day. Leaving you was not an absence of love. It was the ultimate act of it. It was the only way I knew how to save you. Forgive me if you can. Be happy. Be safe. Be brave, my little bird. All my love forever, Grandma. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor, the letter clutched in my hands. The pages were wet with my tears, the ink blurring in places. The silence of the house was no longer empty. It was filled with the magnitude of her sacrifice. The anger I had carried for 8 years, the heavy, bitter stone in my chest, didn't just disappear. It shattered. It broke apart into a million pieces, and what was left underneath was a grief so profound it felt like I was drowning in it. I cried. I cried for the 10-year-old girl left on a neighbor's doorstep, confused and terrified. I cried for the teenager who navigated the cold, impersonal system alone, believing she was unloved and forgotten. I cried for the woman who gave up everything, who worked herself to an early grave in lonely basement apartments and soulless jobs, all to protect a granddaughter she couldn't see. I cried for her, for my grandmother, for the years we had lost, for the reunion that would never happen. Her sacrifice was a story I had been living inside of without ever knowing the words. The house around me was no longer a dilapidated wreck. It was a monument. Every peeling paint chip, every dusty floorboard, every sagging beam was part of a fortress she had defended for me. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a last stand. After a long time, my tears subsided into ragged, exhausted sobs. I looked at the box again. At the bottom, just as she'd said, was another envelope. A thick, lumpy one. I opened it. Inside was cash. Stacks of 20s, 50s, and 100s held together with rubber bands. I didn't count it, but I knew it was a lot. More money than I had ever seen in my life. Her seed money. It was probably every last dollar she had in the world. The weight of it felt sacred. This wasn't just money, it was hours of her life, moments of her pain, pieces of her hope. The thought of spending it on anything felt like a betrayal. I put the money and the letter back in the box, closed the lid, and held it to my chest. I didn't sleep in her bed. I couldn't. Instead, I brought my backpack into the room, took out my Finn sleeping bag, and unrolled it on the floor, right next to the wardrobe. Lying there in the dark, in the profound, breathing silence of the house, I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt watched over. The house was holding me. She was holding me. And for the first time since I was a little girl, I felt safe. The next morning, I woke up stiff and cold, but with a strange sense of calm. The world had been rewritten. My past wasn't a story of abandonment anymore. It was a story of fierce, hidden protection. It changed everything. I spent the next few days just walking, I walked through the house, running my hands over the dusty furniture, peering into closets, opening drawers. I found old recipe books with her notes in the margins, a half-finished knitting project, a pair of worn gardening gloves. Each object was a whisper from the past, a piece of the woman I was only now getting to know. Then I walked the orchard. It was even wilder up close. The trees were magnificent and ancient, their trunks thick and gnarled like old men. The apples were mostly small and misshapen from lack of care, but when I picked one and bit into it, the taste was there, sharp, sweet, and complex. The taste of home. It was overwhelming, the scale of the neglect. The work it would take to bring it back seemed impossible, a task for a team of people, not one 18-year-old girl with no experience and a broken heart. Doubt began to creep in, a cold fog at the edges of my grief. What was I even doing here? Her letter had given me an out. Take the money and go see the world. It was a tempting thought. I could buy a ticket to somewhere warm, get a small apartment, live a quiet, easy life. I deserved it, didn't I? After everything? But then I'd look back at the gray, weathered farmhouse, standing so stubbornly against the sky, and I'd feel a powerful, irrational pull. Selling it felt like selling her memory. It felt like bulldozing a memorial. I was torn. My head was screaming at me to be practical, to take the security, to run. But my heart, for the first time in years, was telling me to stay, to dig in, to fight. It's a heavy thing to find out your whole life has been shaped by a secret. It's like discovering the ground beneath your feet isn't solid rock, but a carefully constructed bridge someone built while you weren't looking. And if you've ever had a moment like that, a revelation that changed not just your future, but the entire story of your past, I want you to know you're not alone. This community we're building here, it's for people who understand that life's biggest moments are rarely simple. They're messy, and they hurt, and they force us to choose who we're going to be. If you've made it this far into my story, thank you. It means a lot. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to face a truth that changed everything. I'll be reading them, because sharing these stories is how we know we're not the only ones. Now let's get back to the choice I had to make. About a week after I arrived, as I was sweeping out the kitchen, I heard a car coming down the long, unpaved driveway. It was the first vehicle I'd seen since the taxi. A sleek black sedan, utterly out of place against the rustic chaos of the orchard, crunched to a stop near the porch. A man in a crisp, expensive-looking suit got out. He looked around, his expression a mixture of distaste and predatory interest. "Hello?" he called out, his voice smooth and confident. I stepped out onto the porch, clutching the broom like a weapon. "Can I help you?" "Are you the owner of this property?" he asked, his eyes flicking over my worn jeans and dusty t-shirt with clear appraisal. "I am," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He smiled, a flash of white teeth that didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. My name is Mark Corrigan. I'm with Viridian Holdings." He held out a business card. I didn't take it. "We're a property development firm. We've had our eye on this parcel for some time. We made offers to the previous owner, an Eleanor Vance, but she was sentimental." The way he said the word made it sound like a mental deficiency. "We were sorry to hear of her passing, but it presents a new opportunity." He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. "This is a formal offer to purchase the property. All 20 acres, house included. We're prepared to be very generous. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the number." He slid the envelope onto the porch railing. "It's a cash offer, no contingencies, closes in 30 days. You could be on a beach somewhere by Christmas, with more money than you'd know what to do with."
He smiled again, that same predatory smile. Think about it. This place is a ruin. It would take a fortune to fix. We're offering you a clean slate, a fresh start. He got back in his car and drove away, leaving the envelope sitting there on the railing, a white rectangle of temptation. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. Inside was a lot of legal jargon, but one thing was crystal clear: the number at the bottom of the page. It was staggering. It was more than generous. It was a fortune. It was enough money to erase every problem I had, every fear about the future. It was the easy way out, gift-wrapped and handed to me. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. You deserve an easy life. Did I? Maybe I did. I took the offer and the box of cash my grandmother had left me and drove into town with the old, rusty pickup truck I'd found in the barn. Miraculously, it started. I found a payphone and called Ms. Albright. I explained the situation, the offer from Viridian Holdings. She was quiet for a moment. That is a very substantial offer, Maya, she said, her voice carefully neutral. They've been trying to buy that land for years. They want to put up a luxury housing development. They know the value of the location. What should I do? I asked, the words feeling small and desperate. That's not for me to say, she replied gently. I can advise you on the legalities, but the choice is yours. Selling means financial security for the rest of your life. You'd never have to worry about money again. Keeping it, well, you saw the place. It's a monumental undertaking. There are no guarantees. It's a choice between a safe future and a meaningful past. A safe future or a meaningful past. That was it, wasn't it? I looked out the window of the phone booth at the small town's main street. I saw the hardware store, the bakery, the library. It was a world my grandmother had known, a world she had fought to preserve from me. I thought about the men in suits, like Mr. Corrigan, turning this place into a sterile collection of expensive houses with no history, no soul. I thought about the gnarled, ancient apple trees being torn down by bulldozers. And then I thought about my grandmother, working her fingers to the bone in some lonely city, all for this land, for me. The choice became terrifyingly clear. It wasn't a choice at all. I'm not selling, I said into the phone, and the words felt like I was planting a flag. I'm staying. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Ms. Albright's voice came back, and for the first time, the professional calm was gone, replaced by a genuine warmth. I had a feeling you might say that, she said. Your grandmother would be very proud. When I hung up the phone, the world felt different. The decision was made. The bridges to an easy life were burned. Ahead of me was a mountain of work, a future of complete uncertainty. But for the first time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. My ground. The days that followed the decision were a blur of brutal, satisfying labor. The seed money my grandmother left was no longer a temptation. It was a tool. I used a portion of it to pay Ms. Albright for her services and to get the truck properly registered and insured. The rest I guarded fiercely, mapping out a budget for supplies. My first project was the house itself. I started with one room, the kitchen. I scrubbed away years of grime, washed the windows until they sparkled, and polished the old wood floors until a faint sheen returned. When I was done, I stood in the doorway, exhausted and aching, and looked at the clean, bright space. It was a small victory, but it was a victory. It was proof that change was possible. That evening, I didn't eat a cold sandwich out of a wrapper. I cooked a real meal on the old gas stove, scrambled eggs and toast. Sitting at the clean kitchen table,
in the warm glow of a single lamp, I felt a sense of domestic peace I hadn't known since I was a child. It felt like home. The next challenge was the orchard. It was too late in the season to do much with the apples, but I knew I had to start clearing the decay. I bought a scythe, a pair of heavy-duty loppers, and thick work gloves from the hardware store in town. The owner was a gruff, older man named Mr. Henderson. I realized with a jolt it must be the husband of the neighbor my grandmother had left me with. He watched me load the tools into the truck, his expression unreadable. "That's a lot of work for one person," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I know," I said, "but it has to be done." He grunted, then disappeared into the back of the store. He returned a moment later with a well-oiled, long-handled pruning saw. "This will be better for the thicker branches," he said, pushing it into my hands. "No charge. Your grandmother was a good woman. She'd want to see this place put right." I was so surprised I could only stammer a thank you. It was the first gesture of kindness I'd received from a stranger in this town, a tiny crack of light in the wall of my isolation. The work in the orchard was backbreaking. I spent 10 hours a day cutting back thorny brambles that had woven a dense carpet between the trees. I hauled away fallen branches, cleared rotten fruit, and slowly, painfully, began to reclaim the ground. My muscles screamed in protest. My hands were covered in blisters and scratches. Every night I would collapse into my sleeping bag, too tired to even dream. Some days were harder than others. There were moments of overwhelming despair when I would stand in the middle of the wild, untamed orchard and feel the impossibility of the task crush me. I'd think of the money I'd turned down, the easy life I had rejected. I'd sit on the ground and cry from sheer exhaustion and loneliness. But then I'd look at the small patch of land I had cleared, and I'd see the progress. I'd remember Mr. Henderson's small act of generosity. I'd think of my grandmother's letter, and I would pick myself up, pick up my tools, and get back to work. I was not just clearing weeds. I was honoring a sacrifice. I was building a future on the foundation of the past. It was the hardest work I had ever done, and it was the most important. Weeks turned into a month. November arrived, bringing with it a sharper chill and the threat of the coming winter. The last of the leaves fell from the apple trees, leaving their skeletal branches stark against a gray sky. I had managed to clear the undergrowth from the first 2 rows of the orchard. It was a small dent in a massive task, but it was visible. It was progress. I had also made the house more livable. I'd fixed a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink using a YouTube tutorial, patched a broken window pane, and had the ancient furnace inspected and turned on. The gentle hum and the flow of warm air through the vents felt like the house was breathing again. One evening, after a long day of work, I was sitting on the front porch, wrapped in an old quilt I'd found in a chest. The sun had just set, and the sky was a deep, bruised purple. A profound quiet settled over the land, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts. I looked out at the 2 clean rows of apple trees, their dark, gnarled shapes like silent sentinels in the twilight. Beyond them, the rest of the orchard was still a wild tangle, a testament to the work that still lay ahead. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The fear and uncertainty that had haunted me for so long had been replaced by something else, something solid and quiet. A sense of purpose. I thought about the word home. For years, it had been a painful concept, a locked door. The group home wasn't a home. The motel wasn't a home. They were just places to exist, to wait. But this place, this was different. It wasn't just a house and some land. It was a story. It was the final chapter of my grandmother's story, and the first chapter of mine. Home, I realized, wasn't something you were given. It was something you built.
You built it with your hands, with your sweat, with your tears. You built it out of memory and hope. You built it by choosing to stay when it would be easier to run. My grandmother had laid the foundation. She had protected this place with every ounce of her strength. Now it was my turn to build the walls and the roof. I felt her presence then, not as a ghostly apparition, but as a feeling of strength deep in my bones. Her resilience was my inheritance, more valuable than the land, more precious than any amount of money. She had given me more than a property. She had given me a chance to find myself. She had given me roots. Here, in this broken-down place, surrounded by dying trees and the ghosts of the past, I had never felt more alive. I was no longer Maya Lane, the ward of the state, the girl with no one. I was Maya Lane, the guardian of the orchard. I had a place. I had a purpose. I was home. The road ahead was long, and I knew it would be filled with hardship and doubt. But for the first time in my life, I was looking toward the future not with fear, but with a quiet, determined hope. The winter would be long, but spring would come, and I would be ready for it. This story, my story, it isn't really about inheriting an orchard. It's about inheriting a choice. It's about discovering that the stories we tell ourselves about our past, about being abandoned or forgotten, are sometimes just the first draft. The truth is often more complicated, more painful, and a lot more beautiful. It's about realizing that the people who love us sometimes have to make impossible decisions to protect us, sacrifices we may never fully understand. And it's about what we do when we're finally given the chance to choose our own path. Do we take the easy road, the one paved with money and comfort? Or do we choose the harder path, the one that asks for our sweat and our tears, but offers us a chance to build something real, something with meaning? I chose the harder, and it has been the greatest gift of my life. My journey is far from over. The orchard is not yet saved. The house is not yet whole. But every single day I am building something. I am honoring the past, and I am planting seeds for the future. And that is a powerful thing. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of second chances and the importance of choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, then I hope you'll join this community. Hit that subscribe button because I'll be sharing more of this journey, the struggles and the triumphs. And more importantly, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what does the word home mean to you? Is it a place you were given, or a place you had to find or build for yourself? I promise I will read every single one of your stories. Because in a world that can often make us feel lost and alone, sharing our stories is how we build a home for each other. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter how difficult the road gets, you have the strength to choose your path. You are not alone.